I wasn't expecting June to be such a good reading month, but it ended up being actually kind of awesome. Out of the 8 books I read, 3 were 5 stars. And I finally got to some books that have been on my TBR for far too long, like Piranesi and The Vegetarian. Howdy book lovers, I'm Anita and here's everything I read in June. The first book I read in June was Yesteryear by Claire Burke, and I've made a whole video about this book and why I think it's mid, so I'll keep it short here and I'll link to that video here somewhere. But anyway, it's basically this book about a tradwife influencer who wakes up one day in the 1850s and has to live like a pioneer. Brings up a lot of themes like gender roles, social media, political extremism, but it doesn't delve too deeply into any of them. I gave Yesteryear 3 stars because I don't think it's necessarily a bad book, it's just not a great book and it's way too overhyped. If you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on it, again, I made a whole video. Yeah, I'll link to it in the description. And with that, I can happily never think about Yesteryear again in my life, so yay. So next up I read The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim, which was like a breath of fresh weird girl air after the slog that it took me to get through Yesteryear. So this book's about Jiyoung, whose father's just left her mother for another woman. It starts off just like a family drama, but when Jiyoung's mother gets a new boyfriend, things start getting pretty weird pretty fast. The new boyfriend is just a mega creeper who is just super gross. He's so gross, you guys. He's this middle-aged white guy who fetishizes Asian women and he's always creeping on Jiyoung and her younger sister, her younger teenage sister. He's super cringe too, like he keeps making them go to this Chinese restaurant and he's acting like he can speak Chinese and Korean, but he can't. He just went there one time. And, you know the type. He's just... the worst. He's just the worst. But anyway, Jiyoung gets obsessed with this guy's eyes, his blue eyes, which are obviously a symbol of him not being Asian because they're blue eyes. And yeah, she's obsessed with his blue eyes and she keeps thinking about them, keeps thinking about eating them, what it will feel like to bite into them. And things just get weirder and weirder from there. It's pretty awesome. There's some pretty heavy body horror in this book, obviously, because, Yeah, anyway, there's some pretty heavy body horror in this book, but mainly the horror comes from the misogyny and the racism and, the kind of consumption of Asian culture. This book, it never felt weird for the sake of being weird. The body horror grows naturally out of Jiyoung's anger and her frustration, and so by the end, it all just feels inevitable. Apparently the ending is divisive, but I kind of liked it. I did think it was wrapped up maybe a little bit too neatly, but yeah, it was good. It was good by me. It was a 4-star read. If you enjoy weird girl fiction or psychological horror or body horror, you will definitely have a good time with this book. Then I read Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju. I've said that wrong, I'm sure. So this is a super short book about an ordinary Korean woman whose life illustrates the everyday sexism that women experience from childhood through adulthood. This book didn't really do it for me. It kind of read like a laundry list of reasons why it sucks to be a woman, and a Korean woman in particular. I guess it was meant to be like a case study, but there was no narrative arc. There was sort of nothing to connect to emotionally. I can see what the author was trying to do, and I know that it's a book that's highly praised and it's an important feminist book, but it just didn't do it for me. I gave it 3 stars, but to be honest, that's only because it was so short. If I'd had to spend a couple more hours with it, it would have really dragged. But luckily, the next book I read was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which was everything that I'd hoped that Kim Jiyoung would be. The Vegetarian's about Yoongi and what happens when she suddenly decides to stop eating meat. It's a simple premise, but again, things get pretty weird pretty fast. It's told in 3 parts, each from a different perspective. First her husband, then her brother-in-law, then her sister. And it works really well to show how Yoongi is both knowable and unknowable, how she's relatable and unrelatable. Each of these parts would work really well as a standalone, but reading them together, it really shows a complete picture of the way society responds to women who refuse to conform. There's no outright horror and only one or two scenes with any violence, but there's just this unsettling atmosphere that just builds and builds. The writing is also absolutely stunning. It's easy to see why this book won so many awards. Every sentence, every word in this book is pulling its weight in a way that makes this book say so much in a very short space. This book was an easy 5 stars, not only one of the best weird girl lit books I've read, but one of the best books full stop. One of those books that you keep thinking about long after you finish reading it. I only realised while making this video that 3 of the books I read this month were by Korean authors. Completely unintentional, but I'm not mad about it. Anyway, the next book was not written by a Korean. It was written by Susanna Clarke, and it was Piranesi. It's been on my TBR for literal years. It's been recommended to me by so many people, so many times, but I kind of put off reading it because I didn't really love Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. But Piranesi, I love this book just as much as everyone said I would. I went into this book blind, and I think that that's the best way to approach it, so I'll give you only the briefest summary. But if you don't want to know anything at all about it, I'll put the timestamp up on the screen so that you can skip ahead. And I shall pause here briefly so that you can do that without rushing, because I'm super considerate like that. Okay, so Piranesi is this guy who lives in an endless house filled with these vast halls, statues, and tides that regularly flood the lower levels. He just spends his days wandering the halls, fishing, chatting to the albatross, and writing in his journal. He believes there are only 2 people in the world, himself and another man that he calls the other. I really love Piranesi as a character. He was so kind and observant and curious about everything. Even though you can sort of pick up on what's really happening through clues in the narrative, it's seeing it unfold through his sort of naive perspective that makes the book interesting. What I loved the most about this book was the atmosphere. It was a really similar vibe to I Who Have Never Known Men, in that it takes place in a big empty world and it explores questions about identity and that kind of thing. So if you like that book, I think you'll definitely enjoy Piranesi as well. This was way beyond a 5-star read for me. It was one of those books that just reaches into your chest and squeezes your heart. It was an instant favourite. After that, I read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I don't have a huge interest in US history, to be honest, so I only really read this because I was making my books to read instead of Yesteryear video, but I really loved it. Kindred's about Dana, who's a black woman living in 1970s California. She gets suddenly and repeatedly pulled back in time to a plantation in the antebellum American South. One of the things I really liked about this book is that the time travel isn't really explained, because it isn't the point. It's just the mechanism that Octavia Butler uses to explore slavery, power, survival, and the lasting impact of history in a way that wouldn't have been possible with a narrator who was of the time. So Dana is constantly forced into situations where there are no good options. Everything is sort of overshadowed with this cloud of violence and fear, which make these impossible decisions that she has to make feel immediate and real. Dana's husband in the 70s is this white dude, and it was really interesting to see how their relationship changed depending on the time period, both in how they were viewed by other people and how they viewed each other. It's easy to see why this book is a modern classic. 4.5 stars from me, definitely recommend, especially if you enjoy historical or speculative fiction. Next I picked up Everyone Is Lying to You by Jo Piazza. This is another book that I wouldn't have read except for my books to read instead of Yesteryear video, which is a video that you should definitely go and watch after this one because it's awesome. And yeah, this is another book that I really enjoyed. It's a thriller/murder mystery centered around influencer culture. The main character is Lizzie, who is this struggling journalist. Her college bestie, Rebecca, is now this huge tradwife influencer who ghosted her right out of college and they haven't talked for 15 years. But Rebecca calls Lizzie up out of the blue and she's like, come and write a profile on me during this big influencer conference that we're having. And Lizzie, she kind of needs the work because she works in print media, which is dying. And she also really wants to know why Rebecca dropped her like a hot potato because they had been super close. But during the conference, Rebecca disappears. She tells Lizzie that she's got this huge announcement that she's going to make the next day and that she'll tell Lizzie what happened between them the next day as well. But then she just vanishes and her husband is found brutally murdered. This all isn't a spoiler. Like, the book starts off with the police interviewing Lizzie about the murder and Rebecca's disappearance. This was a super entertaining read. I don't normally read thrillers because I know a lot of the time the twists seem really contrived and unsatisfying. But I've thought that this book worked really well. I think that I enjoyed it, not so much for the thriller aspect, but because I enjoyed the satire of influencer culture and the trad wife movement, all that. I really liked how it showed all the sort of different cliques within the mummy influencer world. My favourite was the hemfluencers. Henfluencers. Is that a real thing? Please tell me that's a real thing. Anyway, I thought this book did a really good job of exploring the pressure of building a personal brand and the gap between online and real life, and just sort of the performative nature of it all. It was a quick and fun read, 3.5 stars. And finally, I read Eileen by Tessa Moshfegh. If you've read other books by her, you'll know that she has a talent for writing awful characters that you can't sort of help but relate to. And Eileen, she is pretty awful. She's awkward and obsessive and kind of disgusting, but sort of in a way that everyone is awkward and obsessing and disgusting sometimes, you know. She works at a juvenile detention centre in the 1960s, but she's narrating it from the modern day, so she's quite transparent about what an unreliable narrator she is because it's so long ago that she can't remember details of things very well. Eileen's life is super monotonous. She just goes to work, then she goes home to look after her alcoholic father, who is really mean to her. Like the father and her sister who isn't around much, they're both. I mean, everyone's really mean to her because she is, you know, she never showers. She's probably pretty stinky and, you know, she's stinky and mean. So everybody's mean to her. But, yeah, the dad is nasty. What was I saying? Yeah, so her life kind of sucks. But then one day this glamorous woman starts working with her and Eileen becomes obsessed with her. And from there, things, you know, get weird. This book has this really cold, claustrophobic kind of atmosphere that really resonated with me. I also come from a cold, claustrophobic small town, and this book really captured how I felt being stuck there in the months after my mum died and we were waiting to sell a house and wrap everything up so that we never had to go back there. That creeping dread, the feeling of being stuck, this book just captures it perfectly. I gave it 4.5 stars when I finished reading it. But after sitting with it for a few days, I've bumped it up to 5. There's some fat shaming in there, which was in character, but I didn't love being somewhat of a chonker myself. So just keep that in mind if that's something that's an issue for you. So anyway, that was everything that I read in June, and it comes out to a 4.1 star average, which just slightly beats out May. I did have one DNF, which was A House for Good Mothers, but I only read a couple of pages of that, so I'm not counting it. All in all, it was another banger of a month. Lots of 5-star reads and some that probably have claimed a spot on my all-time favourites list. There's a couple of books in there that I wouldn't mind doing a deep dive on, like The Vegetarian, Piranesi and maybe Eileen. So if that's something you'd be interested in seeing, please let me know. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. And if you have any recs for me based on these, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. And if you want to see more like it, you also know what to do. Thanks for watching, stay weird, and I'll see you next time.